Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Story Hour. I'm your host, Daniel Marcus. My esteemed co-host is Laura Blackwell, who has the night off tonight. I hope that you're all healthy and safe, taking care of yourselves and your loved ones. I started Story Hour early lockdown time, just about 3 years ago, almost to the date. And my intention was to find a space for just me and my writer friends to get together and share our work with each other. And I envisioned this really small, kind of close-knit community. And it has just blown up way, way beyond that. We've had literally hundreds of amazing writers just coming through these rooms and sharing their work. And it's just been fabulous. So the way that this works is we turn to what I think of as an ancient and time-honored form of entertainment, which is folks just sitting around a fire telling each other lies. And that's what we do here every Wednesday night. Two writers, to about 30 minutes each, sharing their work. And tonight, we're really happy to have repeat guests, Johnny Compton and RJ Joseph. I'm also really happy to announce that we've received a CEFWA Givers Grant for 2023 so that we can continue to keep the lights on. And because I've been doing this out of pocket for 3 years and I just can't sustain that. So really big thanks to CEFWA for supporting us so we can keep these virtual rooms open so we can keep on bringing you what we like to think of as some of the best spoken word speculative fiction around. So it is our custom to ask our authors to indicate a worthy cause for us to call your attention to. And if you're fortunate enough to be able to help to do that, if not, just be aware, share that awareness with others. And if you have an opportunity to do something at a later date, just think about it. Johnny is reading tonight for The Heart Smiles. That's HTTPS, theheartsmiles.org. The mission of The Heart Smiles is to provide Ghanaian children with a loving home that ensures good health, academic and vocational excellence, hope, and a reason to smile. And they do this by developing and implementing operational infrastructure, building collaborative partnerships, ensuring quality.
We lost him, right? Okay. I hit the pause on the recording just because, in case he gets back, we can maybe pick up. I don't know how exactly Zoom works. I've never really done it, but I figured you could probably pick up and resume. And that might be a little better than having to try to edit this out. Yeah, it might be the Wi-Fi.
Scan looks frozen.
Yeah. I was actually worried that was going to happen to me because my Wi-Fi's been temperamental of late.
Yeah, we have some rain kind of coming through, so I was like, yeah, it's always fun. Let's just see.
Right. I'm really thrilled to hear about the grant. That was the first I'd heard of that. That's awesome.
Yes,
It really is.
money is great in these cases. Yeah, it takes money to do stuff. So somebody wants
Seriously.
just take it. Yay!
Yeah.
I hadn't even realized
Seriously.
it's an option, but just another example of why of the good things SIFWA does, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly. These organizations are really, really important, like not just for us writers, but for like all producers of spec fit content. I mean, they're really important. We need their support.
Another reminder, in case I needed one, that I really do have to get my renewal in this month.
Oh,
It
yeah,
gets past you, right? You don't realize.
yeah. Well, HWA sends out all these reminders, thankfully, because otherwise I'd forget. I keep saying that I was going to apply for the SIFWA membership, but I just haven't. So I do need to put that on my list of things to look at again.
I am literally not even sure that I qualify.
Yeah, I'll have to look at that again too. Somebody told me before, hey, we qualify for HWA, and it probably is going to work this other way too, but I don't know.
Yeah, just check. There's usually like well, yeah, just check. I don't want to say anything because I'm definitely not an expert.
Hi, folks. Sorry about that. My internet connection went out and seems to be back now.
Yep.
But
I
I'm
paused.
getting unstable. Usually it's solid as a rock. I've got fiber, so I'm not sure what's going on. But let's give it another crack. Really apologize for the trouble here. I'm going to take it from the top again. So. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Story Hour. I'm your host, Daniel Marcus. My amazing co-host is Laura Blackwell, who has the night off tonight. I hope you're all healthy, safe, taking care of yourselves, taking care of your loved ones. We started Story Hour during lockdown about 3 years ago with the intention of really just me and my friends, my writer buddies, sharing our work with each other, and just build some community in a weird time. And with Laura's help, it has grown way beyond that. We've had some wonderful authors, literally hundreds of them, coming through these virtual rooms in the last 3 years. So it's grown way beyond my initial expectations, and I just feel really, really privileged to be able to continue to shepherd it. The idea is very simple, and it's what I think of as an ancient and time-honored form of entertainment, which is folks just sitting around the fire spinning fiction to each other. And so every week we do exactly that. We've got 2 authors, about 30 minutes each, sharing their work. Tonight, we're really happy to have Johnny Compton and R.J. Joseph, both of whom have been with us before. I'm also really happy to announce that CEFWA has given us a Givers Grant for 2023, which will help us keep the lights on and keep these virtual rooms open. So thank you. Thank you, CEFWA. It's our custom to ask authors to indicate a worthy cause first to call your attention to. If you're in a position to help, please do that. If you can't, that's fine. Just be aware and share that awareness if you can. Johnny is reading tonight for The Heart Smiles. It's theheartsmiles.org, whose mission is to provide Ghanaian children with a loving home that ensures good health, academic and vocational excellence, hope, and a reason to smile. And they do that by developing and implementing operational infrastructure, building collaborative partnerships, ensuring quality education, and creating a self-sustaining community. So that's The Heart Smiles. Rhonda is reading tonight for United Cerebral Palsy, ucp.org. Their mission is to be the indispensable resource for individuals with cerebral palsy and other disabilities, their families, their communities. And UCP envisions a life of inclusion for individuals with disabilities. So we're going to start the program tonight with Johnny Compton. Johnny is a San Antonio-based author whose short stories have appeared in various publications since 2006, including Pseudopod and Strange Horizons. In 2020, his work made the preliminary ballot for a Stoker Award. His fascination with frightful fiction started when his kindergarten teacher played a record of the classic ghost story, The Golden Arm, for the class. Right on, man. He operates the independent podcast Healthy Fears, and his debut novel, Despite House, is scheduled to be released by Tor Nightfire on February 7th, 2023. I know what I'm doing February 7th. So, Johnny, please take it away. The floor is yours.
Thanks. That's an awesome introduction. Thank you so much. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to my debut novel coming out February 7th. So that's the only time I'll mention it here, but I'll just say it one more time. I am very, very excited about it and very grateful for the opportunity to be back to read again for the Story Hour. I love this. The story I'm going to be reading is called Mrs. Branson Calling. It was originally published in Pseudopod in 2008. So 15 years ago. That's kind of wild to think that I've been plugging away at it as long as I have, trying to make something of this. I have gone back and for the purposes of our oral retelling here, cleaned up some excess that I thought just to kind of streamline and make sure it fits within the time frame here. Also, turned out I just felt like I needed to update certain things that are in a weird time frame of being outdated. 15 years ago was just enough, not quite to be nostalgic, but just to make it sound like it's a little bit dated and out of place. And then lastly, I just want to reassure people that there is something specifically supernatural taking place, because towards the beginning, there's some just descriptions that may make the story sound ageist. I realize all these years later after I've initially written it, and I don't want it to come across that way. I think by the end of the story, it doesn't really necessarily reflect that at all, but I did want to make sure that I addressed that at the beginning. As I started rereading it and rereading it to prepare for this, I started thinking, I want to make sure people are cognizant at the beginning, from the beginning, that we're not just kind of trying to other someone just because of advanced age per se. We'll see as the story goes on. There's something else at play here. So without further ado, here is Mrs. Branson Calling. He heard her breathing, a combination of wheezing and strangling, as the elevator doors slid open. The woman stood in the corner of the car, her back to him. Sean froze, wanting but unable to peel his gaze away from her. Mrs. Branson was naked, her flesh a congested pastiche of maroon blotches, pink skin, black moles, and purplish bruises. Her skin was translucent in some areas, held together by the last exhausted threads that covered the protruding bone. In others, it sagged and bunched, sacks of clumped meat that hung loose. She looked worse than he'd ever seen her, and Sean wondered if she might be delirious from whatever disease had ravaged her. He didn't even recognize her, but knew that it couldn't have been any other person in the building. He finally ripped his gaze away. I'd love to try to help you, Mrs. B, but this is how brothers get caught up, Sean thought. Get into an elevator with a wandering old naked woman who winds up dead a few blocks away, and some nosy damn body tells the cops, I saw her with Sean that night. And that's all it takes. That's how you get 25 years being in the wrong place with the wrong person. The elevator bell chimed, announcing that the doors were about to close. Sean made no effort to get into the car. He could wait for another. It was 3 a.m., and he didn't have anywhere to be aside from in bed. The doors shut, sparing Sean from another second of hearing Mrs. Branson's serrated breathing. The elevator hummed as it ascended, and Sean pushed the button on the wall to call another car down to the lobby. He checked the number he'd saved in his phone again, Kayla, 555-6213. Chances were it would not develop into anything serious, but she seemed nice. Sean was a sucker for a nice girl. Maybe it was the alcohol applying a rosy tint to his immediate memories of her. Then again, maybe he was enamored with her and she with him. Hell, she must have seen something in him. She must have seen something she liked in him. She had even bought him a few drinks. So maybe. He heard it again, this time before the elevator doors opened, like an easy wind passing through a thick, perforated membrane. The doors behind him parted, and there she was, Mrs. Branson in the center of this car, still facing away from him. Her shoulder blades looked sharper than before, as though she were growing wings made of knife-edged bone. What the hell? Sean's mind was still processing what he was seeing when Mrs. Branson took a step backwards, toward him. He flinched as though reacting to a dive-bombing wasp. Hell with this, he said, and walked to the stairs. He didn't know what was going on with her and didn't want to think about it. He just wanted to get home, get to his bedroom, and fall all over the bed. He had to be at work in 5 hours. A small, almost insignificant part of Sean chastised his callousness. Mrs. Branson obviously was in need of help, but what could he do for her? Should he call the police or paramedics? Would that make the situation better or worse? What was the protocol for assisting a frail, elderly recluse who was wandering through the halls of her apartment building dressed in nothing but skin that wanted to loosen itself from the rest of her? I'll call when I get home, he muttered, and realized that he was hurrying. His heart wasn't quite racing, but it had picked up its pace like it had somewhere to be, and his elbows stiffened the way they used to when he was a kid just before his pops took the belt to him. He shook his head, scared of a woman who looks like she's pushing 100 years old. What was wrong with him? She was tough to look at in her condition, unwell physically and perhaps mentally. That was no reason to pretend she didn't exist, didn't need help. If anything, it was the opposite. He started to dial 911 on his cell phone, then stopped. Looking down, something beyond the screen caught his eye, something on the stairs. It was a footprint, rust red against the drab blue-gray step. Not a shoe print, but a five-toed footprint, the first of several he noticed that led up the staircase. He leaned in to look closer, but then heard that deep, hideous wheezing again. It came from higher up the stairs. Sean made it up to the second flight and then saw her ascending. She moved like a mountain climber hiking against a relentless gale, in part because she was impossibly old with kindling for leg bones, but also because, Christ, her feet were sticking. Mrs. Branson paused after every step she took to work her stuck feet loose from the floor. A sound like wet Velcro peeling marked the freedom of each step, leaving behind a footprint, a thin, flaking layer of ruddy skin. Sean gagged. Now he could smell rot, warm and stinging, so far into the back of his nose that it seemed to stem from inside his skull, like her decomposition had infected him and caused his brain to curdle. He shut his eyes and looked and shook his head, trying to shake the smell and the sight and the sound of her out of his thoughts. When he opened his eyes, he saw that she was gone and the footprints had vanished too. Sean leaned against the wall and forced his eyes to remain open, unblinking. For one ponderous moment, the only thing he was sure of was that he wanted to be out of the building. He thought about calling someone, one of his friends or the same rideshare service that had brought him home from the club, to get him and take him out of there. He didn't trust himself to drive. All he needed was for Mrs. Branson to appear in the road while he was behind the wheel to reduce his life to a news blurb. Reckless driver kills himself in a single-car accident. No one would know the story or ask why. They would just shake their heads and say, "Thank God he didn't hit anybody else." Sean went back downstairs. He cycled through the contacts in his cell phone. Who might be awake at this hour or would bother answering the phone and be willing to come get him without asking too many questions? By the time he had made it to the lobby, he had looked at 20 or so names, but he knew he wouldn't call any of them. How would he answer them how would he answer them when they asked what was wrong, whether they asked now, a day from now, or a week later? He rubbed at his eyes. What was he doing? What had happened at the stairs? It already seemed like a faded memory warped by time. Mrs. Branson falling apart before him, appearing ahead of him on the stairwell. It seemed to have happened long ago, or even to have never happened at all. An old woman who rarely sets foot outside of her apartment wakes up in the middle of the night, ventures out in the nude, and gets lost in the building. And she's so fragile that she looks like a loud noise would reduce her to dust and teeth. For God's sake, she was such a wreck that her footprints were the footprints. They weren't there, he said, then repeated. They weren't there. They weren't even there. They had come and gone in a blink, apparitional, just like Mrs. Branson. He was seeing things. His imagination had jumped the track and dragged him along behind it, leaving him to work through the disjointed images left in its wake. None of it had been real. He wondered what could have brought this on, fearing that he smelled the fermentation in the back of his sanity, fearing that he had smelled the fermentation of his sanity back in the stairway. And he remembered Kayla, the girl from the club. She had bought him a shot. No, a few shots. Had brought them to the table. He hadn't seen the bartender pour them, hadn't followed Kayla's movements from the bar after she'd bought them. He'd just downed each one without a second's hesitation. Now he became all the more aware of his vulnerability to more familiar dangers. Stories weaved and raced through the recently burrowed gaps in his mind. Accounts that could be likened to urban legends, except they were less fanciful. In real life, people didn't get drugged and wake up in an ice bath to find that someone had harvested their kidney. They got drugged and then had their homes invaded by a small team of masked men. They got pistol whipped and duct taped and robbed at gunpoint. And the victims were never an illusory friend of a friend, but someone known around the neighborhood. Someone you might bump into in the street and see painted with evidential bruises and abrasions. He went back to the stairs, not wanting to chance being trapped in an enclosed elevator should a group of goons attempt to corner him. He took 2 steps at a time and kept his eyes low. If someone appeared up ahead of him, he didn't want to see them coming and then hesitate. He just needed to keep moving. At the 3rd floor landing, he opened the door to the hallway and slinked inside. His apartment was at the end of the hallway, the 3rd floor on the left. He kept moving, pretending not to notice that the first door to his right, apartment 12C, was ajar. He thought he could hear Mrs. Branson's breaths bleeding through the walls, but that might have just been the old building's ceiling vents groaning. It didn't matter. He would be home soon enough, cozy and safe behind 2 deadbolts and a door chain. He slipped his keys out of his pocket, cognizant of being too noisy. As he came to his door, a slick, metallic clack sounded behind him, that of his nearest neighbor releasing the lock on her door. and his heart inflated with panic at the sound. He snapped his head around to verify that it was indeed only his neighbor Maureen coming out of her apartment, as opposed to some brawny dude with a hockey mask on and a Glock in his hand. "Sean Lewis, what are you doing out at this hour?" Maureen said. She'd made a habit of listening to daily departures and arrivals of her neighbors and of coming out to ask them where they were going or where they'd been on occasion, like she was the hall monitor or the worst secret keeper of a secret police unit. A high threshold for annoyance had always precluded Sean from ever cursing her out and demanding that she mind her own damn business the way Mrs. Clark next door had. Frazzled as he currently was, however, he was amazed that he hadn't just shouted at her to leave him the hell alone before she'd had a chance to open her mouth. A thin, prickly wail made its way down the hall and interrupted Maureen before she could ask Sean where he had been and did he know how late it was. The noise had come from Mrs. Branson's apartment. Sean didn't dare look in that direction. He'd seen enough of the old woman tonight, hadn't he? God, he just wanted to get inside and get to bed. He was home already. He just needed to get inside. "Have you seen her at all today?" he asked Maureen, the words falling out of his mouth before he could stop them. "Seen who?" "Mrs. Branson." Maureen shook her head. "Nah. Her son was over earlier, though. You could hear him shouting at her through the walls, over and over, screaming about he's tired of seeing her, tired of dealing with her. Can you imagine?" Maureen leaned in again, breathing out her words as though she thought her breath smelled like nectar. "Can't imagine a nice young man like you talking to his mama like that. At least I hope not. When's the last time you called your mama?" Curiosity for Mrs. Branson, no concern for her, shoved everything else out of his mind. Guilt as well. He'd seen her, 3 times already tonight? He'd been given several chances to do something for her, anything, and hadn't even bothered to place an emergency call. He wasn't that callous. He couldn't believe that of himself. There had to be another reason, something instinctual and deeper informing his avoidance of her, his fear of her. "He was yelling at her?" Sean said to Maureen. "How long ago was that?" Maureen sighed and shrugged. "Don't know. Earlier. She's been whining like a damn puppy dog ever since." "Ever since? Like all night?" "All night. Why do you think I'm still up? How can anybody sleep with that going on?" "What about when she left her place at some point, right?" Maureen looked at Sean as though he'd asked if dogs lay eggs. "Far as I know, lately she can't leave on her own. That's why our boy's been coming out more to help her. And if she did leave tonight, she must have left. If she did leave tonight, she must have left a recording of her crying behind just to pester the rest of us." Mrs. Branson let out another pitiful wail, and Sean felt himself pulled toward her apartment. "Well, all right then," Maureen said as he turned away from her. "Tell me how she is when you get back. I'll be up probably the rest of the night the way I'm feeling." Sean barely registered Maureen's door shutting behind her when she went back inside. Mrs. Branson's voice had its hooks nested in his ears. The volume of her voice diminished the closer he came, even as its draw grew stronger. He pushed open her front door, and an almost impermeable aroma of spices and flowers welcomed him. It covered the stink of decay about as well as a sheet covered the sight of a corpse, hiding the details but hardly rendering it undetectable. The smells seemed to thicken the darkness, and in turn, the depth of the darkness made the apartment seem immense and confining all at once. A labyrinth stuffed inside a coffin, a place you could never return from. Still, her voice coaxed him farther inside. Broken columns of anemic light from street lamps outside streamed through barred bedroom windows. Sean saw Mrs. Branson's shape, dark and still on the bed, and when he walked into her room, her whining ceased. "Randy? Randy?" she rasped. "That you, baby?" Sean said nothing. He couldn't make out any of her features. The light seemed to consciously avoid her. "Tell me it's you, baby," Mrs. Branson went on. Her voice sounded starved of energy, and Sean had the impression that every word she spoke had to devour a piece of her waning life just to be uttered. "It's okay. It's okay. I know you didn't mean none of what you said. I know." Still, Sean didn't respond. Recognition of the name Randy rose to the surface of his mind, however. It was her son's name. Sean remembered speaking to Randy a few times when they had come across each other in the building. He had seemed like a decent guy, friendly enough. More than a little worn down, as it was apparent he always had to fight for the energy just to smile and say hello, but he always managed to do both. Randy, Randy, say something, please. Sean croaked out the only reply that came to mind. Hey, Mama. She sighed, and Sean thought that it might be her final breath, but then she said, You ain't mad no more. He shook his head. No, I'm not mad. Good, good. Sorry for bringing you back in here like I did. I had to know you weren't mad no more. You were right though. It ain't been fair of me hanging on after I was supposed to be gone. Ain't even that I'm afraid of dying. Never been about that. You know that. I just know I'll miss you. It's a long wait on the other side. You know I know. And that's all it was. That's the only reason I ever came back. Just gonna miss my boys so much. Her voice fell to pieces with that last sentence. She reached out her hand for Sean's, and he accepted it. It felt like petrified parchment. He focused to keep his hand still and relaxed, afraid of snapping one of her twiggy fingers with any movement. It's okay, Mrs. Mama. He cleared his throat. It's okay. Her breaths shortened and hastened, and Sean knew that she was building up her final reserves to speak again. Speak her last. He wanted to be elsewhere, anywhere but here, bearing witness to an overdue end. He wanted to resent Mrs. Branson for luring him here, but he was angry with himself more for wishing he could just leave her to pass alone. Beyond that, Sean resented Randy's absence and his abandonment of his responsibility. I never meant to be a bird, Mrs. Branson said, and the saturation of heartbreak in her voice made Sean forget all about resenting anything. I just came back to see you grow. Didn't want to leave you without nobody. But you're right. You're grown. You've had your own life to live, and I know I came back and I'm way past overdue what was promised to me. I know. I never meant to be a bird. I just loved you, Randy. I didn't want to let you go. Sean was debating whether continuing this charade and telling her that he loved her back would be charitable or cruel when he felt Mrs. Branson's brittle grip turn to sand and slip through his fingers. Mrs. Branson? He reached forward toward where her neck would be to check for her pulse. His hand sank into a mound of dust, all that was left of her. He felt his eyes swimming in damp tears. Now he really didn't know what to do. Before he told himself he was unsure before he told himself he'd been unsure and that was the reason he had dodged being involved or being accountable. Now there surely was no right answer. Should he have called emergency services? It seemed much too late for that. Should he try to find Randy's phone number somewhere in her apartment among Mrs. Branson's things and call him and tell him what he'd missed? Ask him to explain what the hell he had just seen. Tell Randy about how Mrs. Branson had tried to reach him before he left today, tried to manifest herself to him, and ended up snaring Sean instead. No, of course, he wasn't going to do any of that. He left Mrs. Branson's apartment, wiping the dust from his palm onto his jeans. Exhaustion supplanted his fear. He'd save thinking about tonight's happening for another day, perhaps postpone it indefinitely. There was no way he could fool himself into believing it hadn't occurred, or that there was any rational explanation for what he'd seen and heard. He didn't have the imagination for that. But ignoring it, willing it away from memory and reburying it anytime it tried to uncover itself, that required no imagination, only effort and determination. He didn't have the strength now to start shoveling dirt on this memory. But after a decent night's sleep, he thought he could get started on it in the morning. At last, he made it to his front door, opened it, and stepped inside. The end.
Oh man, thank you so much, Johnny. That was great.
Thank you.
You know, I love your voice, not just your author's voice, but just the sound of your voice and reading the material. It was really a treat. Thank you so much.
Really appreciate that. Thank you.
It is our custom to just pause for a moment between authors, just to let the work sort of ring and resonate a little bit, and have sort of a gentle segue to the next author. So we're going to do that. Just chill for a sec. All right. Johnny Compton, everybody. Thank you again, man. Rhonda Jackson Garcia, aka RJ Joseph, is a Stoker Award nominated Texas-based academic and creative writer / professor whose writing regularly focuses on the intersections of gender and race in the horror and romance genres and in popular culture. She's had works published in various applauded venues, including the 2020 Halloween issue of Southwest Review and the streaming of Hill House, essays on the haunting Netflix series. Awesome. Rhonda is also an instructor at the Speculative Fiction Academy. She occasionally peeks out on Twitter at rjacksonjoseph or at www.rhondajacksonjoseph.com. Rhonda, welcome back. Take it away. The floor is yours.
Hi, thank you so much for having me again. I really love coming to play with you all. I'm going to read a story of mine that was published in an anthology called Picnic in the Graveyard by Cemetery Gates Media last summer. I do want to give a little bit of a warning, particularly for parents who might have kids listening. There's lots of colorful language here, kind of some mention of drug use and some sexual innuendo. So this is that warning. So here we go. The Crazy with Daisy. I love my best friend in the universe, but she always drove me nuts, like beyond anything I ever experienced in my whole life. My crazy Daisy wanted me to be crazy with her, even when she knew what she was doing was dangerous. And I obliged more often than I declined. I couldn't refuse her anything. Like the time she grabbed my hand and we ran away from a taxi driver without paying because she said the woman had insulted us. She had, and was pretty ugly about it too, but we also had ridden in her cab with the agreement that we pay for her service. I was just glad Daisy hadn't also hauled off and punched the woman as she sometimes did to folks who crossed us. Then there was the time she bought us those edibles from some chick she knew, and we stayed high as shit for 2 days straight because there was no content label on the brownies and she didn't ask. We had fucked up a dude who grabbed Daisy's ass in an alley when we went on our 4th Munchies run. And I'd never loved her more than in those moments when she dragged my blade swiftly across his bare stomach as I held his ass down and punched him in the head. He'd forever wear that D and J she engraved in him. But she may have topped her list of crazy on our walk through the cemetery that one day. Really, what happened was partially my fault because I made the mistake of saying my thoughts out loud where she could really hear them. We were super close and all, and she could sometimes read my mind. She probably wouldn't have picked up on my curiosity from that day without me verbalizing it. We walked through the old Lafayette Cemetery #1 every other Sunday afternoon when we made the drive from Houston to visit my granny for the weekend. Always in the daylight hours because Granny insisted it was the only almost safe time to do it if we just had to. And we just had to. Ain't no good coming out of that place, she'd admonish every single time we left. Not too much good going in either. She usually spat a thick brown stream of snuff-tinged spittle into her cup at this point to punctuate just how she felt about the graveyard being the final resting place of the family who had owned ours as slaves. She'd spit again, the ongoing memory as foul as the tobacco products she dipped her whole life. They robbed our lives then, and there's devils and stuff waiting to rob you now. If y'all gotta go and come back real quick while the sun's still up. We kiss her and agree to be back before dark. As peaceful as the cemetery always was, I wasn't trying to see what these devils she religiously mentioned were all about. She never offered any more explanation, and we never asked. Besides, I was carrying my own beloved devil, Daisy, right along with me. She never hesitated to raise some kind of hell. The innocently spoken thought that unleashed the devilment that day was, I wonder what those mausoleums look like on the inside. I had seen a large crack in one of the ornate little death houses, and it triggered my insatiable curiosity. It looked old, and it sat right in the middle of Hurricane Central, so a crack was no huge deal. But I'd never seen the inside of one in real life. Daisy squeezed my hand and wrinkled her nose. She was cute, and she loved me. I loved her too, but I didn't want to take our perfect friendship to the next level. We had 15 years of history and we're still inseparable. I felt like adding a sexual aspect would likely ruin that. Neither of us could keep a lover, and although we still had all the intimacies as any other couple, I was willing to ride along like that just to keep her close. Even if she and Granny insisted we were soulmates and should just get on with the loving already. I don't know, she answered. Why would you want to go inside with all this dead smell around us? Yeah, just about everything here is dead. That's what this place is for, right? She suddenly dropped my hand. I thought she was testy at me teasing her. She got a little bristly sometimes when I really dug it. That didn't mean I tried to evoke that kind of response from her on purpose. Well, not often. Certainly not right there, right then. Suddenly, she was gone. I spun around to find her with her head stuck halfway down inside an even larger crack some ways away that I hadn't seen. Damn it, Daisy, you being peak white girl right now with this crazy shit. Get from out of there before something drag your skinny ass down that hole. I stalked towards where she stood on one tiptoe, going further down. You know what Granny said. Get your tail down from there. I ain't taking my black ass down there to get you either when you fall. Then she was gone, like all the way down the hole, leaving one sandal propped against the bottom of the mausoleum after it dropped from her foot. I stuck my face to the hole, trying in vain to get my shorter, rounder body up closer and higher. Daisy! I could hear her screaming on her way down. To where? How far? Fuck. I'm coming, girl. I didn't know how I was going to get down there, but I was determined, regardless of all the shit I had talked about not going to save her. I couldn't live without her. I ran along the sidewalk on the rows of crypts where I could still hear her muffled sobs and screams. I followed them to some bushes behind one of the older units. There in the brambles was a huge hole in the ground, much larger than the crack Daisy had fallen into or been pulled through, large enough to accommodate my hips and thighs. Daisy! I clambered down through the hole, trying to keep the thorns on the bushes from scratching my face while I held tightly to my cell phone. The deeper I went, the more quickly the signal went out. I probably should have called 911 before I headed down, but I hadn't had that presence of mind. What the hell kind of place was I headed to that cut out cell phone signals? I landed at the bottom of the hole after several moments of sliding down the slick dirt. The path was well worn, although it was also well hidden. I took some time to try to let my eyes adjust and listen for Daisy again. All I had to go on was whimpers that stabbed at my heart. She was full of spit and vinegar, my Daisy. If she was whimpering instead, she was really scared. And that pissed me off. I turned my flashlight app on and the rays landed on slimy walls with just enough space between me and them for me to turn around. It looked just like any other nightmarish set of tunnels I'd ever seen on television, but slimier and stinkier. The smell wasn't quite like death, but more like the lingering of decay you might get from something rotting slowly but surely. When I heard the muffled sounds of struggle coming from a tunnel on my right, I headed that way. Daisy! I lowered my usually loud voice to a stage whisper, pretty sure whatever had her could hear me too, but still wanting her to know I hadn't abandoned her. I made my way towards the noise as quickly as I dared go with the slick ground beneath me and the jagged edges of tree roots and random pieces of bone and wood jutting out from the walls around me. I grabbed a funky patterned piece of fabric off one of the bones and fear gripped my bowels. The patch was from the pants Daisy was wearing, which matched my blouse. Granny was always giving her girls, as she affectionately called us, items from her wardrobe that she decided she was too seasoned a woman to wear anymore. That particular set was one of her favorites. Daisy had the height to pull off Granny's pants, where I had the breast to fill out her blouses. Granny was especially tickled when we left that day in our matching gifted set. I love to see a couple all dressed alike. Her guffaws followed us through the cluttered front foyer of her little cottage. Granny, we ain't a couple, we just homegirls, I reminded her. At the same time, Daisy contradicted me. Granny, she can't fight us forever when we look this good together in our fits. They both had laughed, a sound that always filled me with happiness when coming from the two people I loved most in the world. I had to find Daisy, and we both had to get out of that place okay. What would happen to Granny if I died or became injured? What would happen to me and Granny if Daisy did? That thought spurred me on a little faster until I almost tripped. I heard harsh breathing down below where I originally had the flashlight turned upward. I trained the beam of light at my feet and couldn't quite comprehend what I saw until I saw Daisy, hands outstretched toward me, silent, face soaked in tears. Are you okay? We got to get out of here. I reached down to help her up, and she grasped at my hands with one of hers, but pointed with the other. I didn't immediately look where she pointed. Instead, my brain registered that I must have stumbled over something other than Daisy. I looked down, and at my feet lay a small figure. I thought it might be a dog or something, but it was covered in red blood and had really short hair covering its body. The kind you saw on super hairy people who weren't supposed to have that much hair but did. It was also humanoid. I could then make out a head or something mangled where the head would have been, a torso, and 3 appendages much like ours. It wasn't quite child-sized, maybe toddler-sized. It wasn't no human toddler, not human at all. The things Daisy pointed towards weren't either. A group of the creatures huddled away from the rays of the flashlight. They varied in size, mostly comparable to the one Daisy obviously had killed with her 70s goth disco boots. I always knew her fashion sense would help us out in big ways one day, other than getting us into the good clubs. Some were a bit larger than those. Very few were smaller. All had some variation of the short hair covering their otherwise naked bodies. Wide-set, slitted eyes sat on either side of their faces, shut against the bright light I shone at them. It started to register that some of them had ears and others didn't. Some had various body parts either missing or misshaped. Further investigation revealed that wasn't the worst thing about them. 2 stepped forward from the crowd, and the human hand on the largest one was noticeable from first glance. The desiccated fingers moved slowly, the creak from the dry joints almost audible. The other apparent leader dragged a human foot behind it, toes wiggling slowly as it helped paddle the body forward. What the actual fuck? My mouth fell open and I dragged Daisy up towards me. It was really time to go when I saw the human breasts jaggedly sewn onto the front of another one of the creatures, with a smaller one nuzzling and suckling at one of them. Turn off the light, it hurts us. The voice that came across the short way was gritty and guttural, but clear. Bullshit, I'm keeping the light on you and you gonna let us go. I released Daisy's hand just long enough to grab my switchblade from where I kept it tucked in my bra. Fight us and we gonna be rocking and rolling in this bitch. Move. Daisy regained her bravado and soon brandished both her boots, heels out, pointed towards our blockade. Another spoke. We need more parts to make us whole. We need your parts. The longer I looked at them, the more evidence of their plastic surgery I saw, whether I wanted to or not. Why would we just let you kill us and take our parts? You got us fucked up. We are almost extinct. Disease and rot have taken more of us than we can afford to lose. Some of us can no longer bear and feed our young. We will not perish. We ain't perishing either. Daisy issued her warning down low from her throat. There are no longer any new bodies being buried here, so we have to catch humans when we can. We caught you. You will not escape. Good luck with that. I swung the blade around wildly, flashing the light as widely as I could. There are more of us behind you and surrounding you on all sides. The musty smell in the place had increased, so I knew it spoke truth. Still, Daisy and me were going to go down fighting. We were ride or die, and that didn't change when we just might really die after riding. Something charged me from my right side, banging hard into my thigh as I barely caught sight of a fuzzy head covered with a human skull forehead ramming me. I slashed my blade across the human ear it wore, and it howled in pain and fell back. Daisy was busy on my other side, swinging her boots and connecting with wet thuds into solid bodies. We fought them off as best we could before we both realized there were more of them than us. We were doing some damage, but it wouldn't be enough. They had too many reinforcements. We huddled together, back to back, and Daisy whispered over her shoulder, "We got to do something different." I had no other ideas. Then I heard her speak, and in that moment, I wasn't sure I wanted her to because I had no idea what she would say. "Wait," she yelled. She repeated her command, and the movement in the hole paused. One of the leaders held up its hand and others stopped their attacks. "We can help you get parts." I swiveled my head around to stare at her. "Girl, no, really. You say the light hurts you, so you obviously can't go hunting in the daytime. We can. And we can bring you people, so you don't have to endanger yourselves doing it. In return, you let us go and you never hurt us." How many people? I couldn't believe they were entertaining this bargain. But if the crazy shit got us out of there, I had to entertain it too. We just can't go around snatching everybody who comes in here. If we're discovered, it's the end for us and you. Can you get one every time you visit here? We have been watching you. We know you come every 14 days of sun. That tightness in my gut came back, replacing the fight or flight in me. They had been watching us for how long? Deal. But you can never hurt us again, ever. Or else we reveal where you are and send somebody to really exterminate you. You had better keep your end of our bargain as well. You can never hide from us. It looked directly at me. We also keep watch on your beloved Granny. If you fail us, her parts will be distributed among us first of all. After her, we will find you. Granny would never leave her New Orleans to get out of their grasp. They were already watching. Granny apparently knew more about these things than she had told us. We had to keep her safe. Daisy looked at me and we locked eyes. I nodded. Okay, now let us out of this stink hole. One more thing, we will need a replacement for you for today. You must bring us the first before you leave. I became frantic. How do you expect us to just do that on the fly like that with no prior preparation? You had better figure it out, or we will take you both back before you can leave here. We are Legion. Daisy took my hand that time. Fine, whatever. Just let us go so we have time to figure this out. The crowd parted, and we could see a ray of light coming from up above the tunnel behind them. I continued to flash my cell phone in their direction, blade still in hand, as Daisy took lead and ran towards our escape. I expected the creatures to rush us from behind, but they didn't. We emerged on a different side of the cemetery just as the sun was setting. The first thing I did after we ran far away from the hole was grab Daisy and press her against the nearest crypt. She didn't fight my embrace or the fevered kiss I pressed to her mouth. She returned my passion, and soon our breath was coming in jagged rushes. I love you, you crazy ass girl. Well, shit. All it took was for us to be attacked by monsters and to make a murderous pact with them to make you decide to commit. She looked into my eyes. This is finally a commitment, right? It sure is. I think it's a requirement to commit to somebody when you make a pact to murder with them. I tell her later how sexy her whole proposal had been. Even when I thought we might not make it out of that hole alive, I'd been massively turned on hearing her suggest we go on a long-term killing spree together. I didn't hate the idea. If that didn't show we were twin flames, nothing would. We could hear the vestiges of a heated conversation coming our way from between the crypts. Stop it. I want to leave. I don't like it here. Let me go. The voice was pleading with someone who apparently wasn't listening. Daisy and I moved quietly to where the couple stood behind a row of the small stone buildings, the speaker down on the ground underneath the assailant. You know you want this. Just shut up. I looked at Daisy and she held her hand out towards the couple, inviting me to move in first. Hey. I met the gaze of the person on the ground. Everything okay? Terrified eyes met mine, and they shook their head in fright. Why don't you mind your own business? The attacker turned his head towards us and then smiled. Oh, maybe not. Why don't you join us? I can do all of you bitches real quick. Why don't you let them go and come play with us instead? Daisy turned her signature head tilt on him and he was a goner. To be fair, the head tilt always worked on me too. It was delicious. Dude was like that little dog with the bone who was willing to let his trap prey go at the promise of a bigger prize in Daisy and me. He got up off the victim he held down and they scrambled up and ran out of the cemetery without looking back. I was glad there was no witness. Our new partners hadn't specified whether they wanted the victims dead or alive, so we opted to slice his tongue out and cut his hamstrings before shoving him down the hole. That way we could still get a little blood and still leave him alive for whatever they wanted to do with him. And he couldn't scream or run. I really liked that part. After we were done with our first job, my blood swirled around inside my body until I thought it would bust. The sun was well on its way down, but we no longer feared the place after dark. We knew what devils lurked there, and we had some modicum of protection. But as we walked towards home, I told Daisy, Granny got some explaining to do. She giggled and pulled my hand into her shirt. So do you, my darling Janae. So do you. Okay, thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Rhonda. That was great.
Thank you.
Man, all right. Johnny Compton, RJ Joseph, thank you so much for a great program. Thanks for coming back, joining us at Story Hour. You're both welcome back again, of course, anytime. Just shout out and we'll figure it out. And thanks to all of you out there for coming back every week as well. And thanks to my fabulous co-host, Laura Blackwell. There may be some weird technical glitches that we're gonna have to work through for tonight's program, but we'll figure it out and we'll get the either reconstitute the live stream or post the file for the Zoom session up on the Facebook Story Hour page. Next week, we have Nadja Bulkin and Cassandra Kaw. Looking forward to that. And till then, stay safe, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you soon. Good night, everybody.